welcome to Spirit Coffee Talk this week. Super excited to have the wonderful Emily back with us. As always, my name is Elyse. I'm joined with the lovely Ginette. Lisa is off enjoying beautiful weather in Saskatchewan, so we miss her this week. But we're back. We're back to talk with Emily a little bit more. Oh, the door is opening. Is that a spirit or a dog?
That that is nothing. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So
I Spirit's here for our talk. I'm gonna close
apparently,
it. You don't have to look at the laundry machine, but welcome in whoever that is.
welcome in, whoever that is. Yeah, so we're here with Emily. So last time we had Emily, we were talking a lot about happenings in the world, RV Wade, everything going on with that. And as much as we wish those things weren't happening in the world, it's a really interesting time to have Emily back because she wrote a book that opens with abortion. And we also have her on because I have the pleasure of working with her. And I'm just so sad that that's ending soon, I just have to say. But part
No,
of the things that we've been working on is her intuitive development alongside this calling to put out this really important book. And now hindsight 2020, it's important. The timing of it is important, and you were clearly guided. So yeah, just to kind of plant that seed, I'm excited to talk to you more about that. So welcome.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And so I'm so curious about your book. So if we were to, I have so many different levels of questions, but if you were to give like a quick premise without, of course, giving away the whole bounty of it, how would you encapsulate your book?
I describe the book as examining all of the messy parts of young womanhood, but with a healthy dose of humor, is how I describe it. And I wanted to catch all the messy bits that tend not to be represented in women's fiction. And abortion was one of those. And I never imagined how timely this would be.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yep.
And so, would you say with your book, uh, is this something that you feel is really reflective of your own personal journey, or is it something that you just gathered from your observations of the world and put them into a book?
That's such an interesting question after working with Elyse. And believe me, I am way sadder that our coaching time is coming to an end than she is. But I think before I started sort of opening up spiritually, I would have said that the book was a way for me to process my own late 20s, early 30s after having some time to reflect on that period. And the book is fiction. There are some wild things that happen in there. I wish my life were that interesting, but they're not. And that's what's fun about fiction is you can blow things up and do whatever you want. Um, but I would have said it was really my way of processing and communicating the feelings that I had when I was going through that time in my life and friends' feelings. I think women are kind of launched into the world, whether they're coming from university or whatever, graduate school, wherever it is, when you start feeling like a grown up. And at least for me, I expected that my life would sort of like fall into place and stay there. And as Elyse likes to say, I've borrowed this phrase so many times from you. For me and for some other women who are dear to me, it was a real gong show. so, um, so I would have said, yeah, it was trying to capture all that goes along with the gong show and the hilarity in it, the tragedy in it, all of it. But now, upon reflection, I feel like I am carrying forward a story that's not just from within me. I think there's something that feels collective to me. Um, and I just feel like female ancestors behind it. I feel like generations of women whose experiences were tamped down or who were shamed, or who were kind of pushed into the shadows. I feel like they're with me in the story.
Hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like kind of piggybacking off what we talked about last time, it's like the feminine has never really, not never, that's the wrong word. It's been a long time. It's been a damn long time since the feminine has been able to show up in their wholeness. And that is messiness. And that's pregnancy and abortion and challenges. And that's emotions. And it's all of the things that there really hasn't been space for, right? We're told to be everything other than who we are. And when you are who you are, it's not enough, is what we're told usually. So I love that message overall. And I'm curious, like, I know this has been a real, like, it's a career thing for you, right? You're a writer, you love to write, it's who you are. And I know there's been a real kind of intuitive push behind, and it's kind of been this like, one's going on one track and the other's going on the other track, and they're kind of like taking their turns on who's in the lead. So I'm curious, because I know we get a lot of conversation, or a lot of questions rather, about like, what does it mean to follow purpose? What does it mean to listen to my intuition in regards to these things? It's scary. Like, what if it doesn't work? So I'd love if you could back up and talk about like what that opening was for you, because that was before you and I ever met. What was that kind of like initial nudge from, hey, you're not, you're here to do and write and hold space for some big things. So go.
Yeah. Go. I love that question. I think for anybody who, because you talk about those parallel tracks, I really tried to push away writing, period, much less this story that feels so personal to me, for a really long time. I think I mentioned last time I'm a recovering lawyer, and I remember thinking after college whether I was going to go to law school or go get my master's in creative writing. And I kind of talked myself out of getting a master's in creative writing, because I told myself, like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my rent, and the path of a lawyer is clearer and it's more secure, blah blah blah. So I really pushed past a lot of very clear signals in retrospect that were sort of pushing me in this direction. And then I think the timing is so interesting. And a lot of times when synchronicities occur, we can't really see them until, a couple years down the road. So for me, my guardian angel is my dad's mom, who died 20 years before I was born. Her name is Frida. And I now recognize, of course, she was trying to get in touch with me for a very long time. Um, and in the summer of 2020, she just had enough. And now that I know more about her personality, she doesn't really do things small. So I had the whole crazy experience of like my bedroom door locking from the inside, the lights going bananas, and to the point where I had to pay attention, and I had to listen to my gut telling me that that was her. And interestingly, within a couple weeks, I would say, I had a talk with my literary agent, who said, you know what? I thought we were going to sell this book to a traditional publisher really fast, but people don't want to touch the abortion. And she told me, and it's only one part of the story. Um, and she told me that the most prudent thing to do would be to put the book in a drawer, write my second book, write my third book. She could sell those, and then maybe then the traditional publishing world would be ready for this book. And I am a rule follower. And so the cerebral me would have said, okay, I'm just going to do what she tells me to do. But I just had this physical reaction where I just knew this wasn't necessarily, what I wanted to be doing, but I just knew that I had to roll that boulder up the hill and get the book out. And so I found the tiny independent feminist press to publish it. But I think that opening up and what it means to listen to your intuition, whether it's with career choices, with relationship choices, whatever it is, for me, it's a very physical thing where um, I when I pay attention to what's going on in my body, I'll usually get where I need to go. And so I listened that day, and I think it's because I had that push from Frida, who again is not subtle. And I felt it so strongly, and I just was like, well, shit, I guess we're going to do this thing, and we're going to do it a non-traditional way.
Mm-hmm. And did you, when that happened, when she came to you and you were having those experiences, were they like, so like the doors locking and stuff, did you find direct communications too about writing the book, or was it to transition out of being a lawyer into writing? Like, what was your, I mean, sometimes we have these experiences that we try to explain it and we can't quite explain why it was so profound. I mean, sure, the door was locking and those are creepy things. But was there also specificity to you in the message?
No. And in fact, I mean, that's it just sort of like tied everything up. I had already written the book,
Hmm.
which in itself, the whole time I was writing it and not being paid for any of that time, by the way, I was thinking, what am I doing? It's 3 years. What am I doing? I had my children during that time. I had babies and chaos. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And I had transitioned out of law into a day job that my day job is writing also. And that seemed so kind of separate when it happened. But now I look back, and of course, I was getting these nudges that I tried to resist when I was younger and just couldn't as I got older. And I think, at least for me, the opening came, I think some of it just had to be age, where you become sort of more acquainted with all the gray areas in life and all the different directions it can go. And so, no, when she locked the door from the inside and made the lights go cuckoo and set off the fire alarm in the middle of the night, and shall I go on? That corresponded with that decision I had to make of, do I put this book in a drawer or do I push it out into the world? Which for me was the real soul challenge. And Elyse has been helping me try to rise to meet that challenge.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so neat to hear that part of the story of the way spirit will use 3D things however they can to get our attention to, echo the frequency or the knowings we're already having. And I say that because a friend of mine recently told me a story, just really quickly to echo yours, of her dad had passed. He loved practical jokes, but at a pivotal time for her, when it was for her to change her path, not that she was going down a bad one, but it was like, no, let's step up. One of the ways for him to get her attention was he threw the laundry all over the floor. And her kids were like, the laundry is all over the floor upstairs and the door's closing. We don't know why. And she went upstairs, put it all away. And sure enough, later the afternoon, she goes, laundry's thrown all over the floor again. Right. And it wasn't until she talked to a medium that they could say, that was your dad and yada, yada. He was
Mm-hmm.
trying to get your attention. And so I love how it was very 3D things to get your attention on something you already were feeling and knowing and doing, because not all communication from spirit is always us hearing them say, hey, Emily, can we sit down for a minute and, chat it out? Sometimes it's to echo those feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll do it in unique, sometimes very blunt ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that story. I mean, so that resonated with your friend, this kind of practical jokey type thing. And when you brought up, an important part of the story is I spent a couple months, I think like 3 or 4 months, just wondering if I was bananas crazy, and made my first and this started when I finally saw a picture of my dad's mom and had this visceral reaction where I really just kind of lost it and I didn't know why I was reacting that way. which is why then I knew it was her when she was doing all this stuff. She was on my mind. But I made my first appointment with a medium a few months later, and I just still remember the feeling of just being so nervous. And we did the little meditation to drop into the session. And the second she opened her eyes, and all she knew was my name. And she opened her eyes and she said, "Okay, I have a grandmother who really wants to talk to you." And then it all started coming, pouring out. And it was so validating. And that's the first time I actually asked her. So she'd already been pushing me so directly and viscerally and in my body to move this book forward. But that was the first time I said, and it was right when I'm now realizing it was right after I had submitted the book to this publisher I ended up going with. And I asked, the medium said, do you have any questions? And I wasn't really prepared, but I said, "What does she think about the book?" And the medium said, "I have chills, which means," and she's showing me green light, go. And so, yeah, exactly when I needed her, she was there to push. And sometimes it was by doing crazy things in my house, and sometimes it was talking through the medium, and sometimes it would just be a feeling that I would get and I knew it was her. So it can be all those things, which keeps us on our toes.
Yeah.
For
I love what you're saying too about like the visceral response that you have, because I think so often on Spirit Coffee Talk, or even if we're working with clients, it's like tapping into that undercurrent or that body, because the body is the house of the spirit, right? The spirit is driving the car. And so I feel one of the easier ways for us to start to get in tune with like what feels right intuitively is like, does this feel good in my body, or do I like want to like shrink forward? Because that is such an unconscious response. It's not something that we can, it usually happens before you can even think the thought, right? You're having that visceral response, and we've all had those experiences before. Um, and so I love that you're saying that, because it's like, it's one of those things that we can't necessarily deny, right? We can tell ourselves like, oh, the door locked because the kids were playing in the room and they, you know, whatever, or like, oh, that was just a cool breeze, or, you know, like we're so good and we've been taught to like rationalize things that we see like with our external senses, but it's a different story when it's internal to you. Um, which I love that was one of the biggest, like, hey, here's a visceral response that you can't deny.
Right. And you have helped me. So one of the greatest gifts of many that you've given me is now I'm still learning and having to remind myself, but now I just push pause and drop into my body just for a few seconds sometimes, so much more than I used to. And it's such an obvious tool, and it makes me sad that, I mean, I did not know to do that. And I had a previous marriage, and before the wedding, I was so inexplicably sick to my stomach for like months, like 3 months before the wedding. And now I would say, hold up, my body is like literally rejecting this union that's coming up. But back then I was like, well, maybe I'm just a little stressed, you know? And it was great because at the wedding, I was totally miserable and everyone told me how great I looked and just assumed I went on some wedding crash diet. I'm like, no, I'm having an existential crisis, but thank you anyway. So, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm late to the party, but thank goodness you helped me get in touch. Yeah, the body knows.
Yeah, I think we're all late to the party, honestly, because I think, especially as feminine, we've been told that the things that happen with our body are gross. So they're like, keep it to yourself, or
Yeah,
it
hide
is.
it.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
we just
remember
like hide it.
I remember feeling so proud. I had horrible periods, like really bad periods. And I remember um like hemorrhaging, feeling horrible, but feeling proud that I was able to hide it. No one could tell. And I would push myself to the point of exhaustion or throwing up in sports or something. But then I felt like Yeah, I did it, no one knew. Which to me now is so backwards, like so unbelievably backwards. But I remember when I was younger, I felt like taking the masculine type approach to what was something very feminine, very visceral, was the way that I should do it. And I'm not saying masculine better than feminine, both are needed, but I was neglecting one, thinking the other was better and feeling proud,
Mhm.
Yeah,
right? It's
that's
crazy.
so crazy because I know Elise has had, but I've also had that experience. So all three of us have had that same experience and reacted the same way. We just push forward, and
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. It's like, no, no, your body's saying like something's amiss here, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, as women especially, there's this separation, I think, that's ingrained in us from our bodies. And, you know, women aren't supposed to like poop. No, that's like, so it's really strange because we know it happens, but we're not supposed to talk about it. And yeah, so there's such a separation. And I think it's so sad that it often takes us way into adulthood to get back into our bodies. And there's so much wisdom there that I think predates us by a lot, by a lot.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I would imagine part of that is also maybe what helped push you to keep that part of the abortion in your story in the beginning, right? Like you're this divine feminine knowing of following that versus doing what you should,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's
Like, yeah.
something that it's bananas that we don't that it can't be just part of, it can't be part of literature, it can't be part of art, it can't be part of conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because statistically we know that this happens to between a quarter and a third of women. And it has been throughout recorded history. And so it's very strange if you think about it that it's something that's just kind of forbidden to discuss or, God forbid, represent in art. And I think a lot of people, myself included, I love to read. That's kind of the main art that I consume. And I love to be able to see myself or identify with something in a story that maybe is written from a completely different perspective. And I think it's important for everyone to be able to find something to relate to. And that's something a lot of women can relate to.
Mm-hmm. I like too how you brought up the purpose or the part of discussion. And if we take abortion again as us having the ability to discuss it, right? Parties of whatever opinion coming to the table to discuss, not join this side because this is the right one, that's the wrong one. That's not discussing, right? That's putting a line down the center. It's the discussion piece, the sharing of stories, the sharing of why. This is my why based on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is my why based on this experience, right? And what can we learn from it? I think that's what's so important to bring up about everything that's come up, and the timeliness of your book allows an opportunity for someone to have that discussion, even if it's just with themselves. Like, wow, I didn't see it from that perspective, or wow, that's similar to my story. Look at what this is opening for me. I think
Yeah,
that's a beautiful thing.
that is definitely my hope is that women might, if they've had abortions themselves, they might let go of some of the shame that they may have been carrying or may not realize they've been carrying. Or if they struggle, if someone in their life has had an abortion and they have trouble with that, that they might be able to say, oh, you know, maybe I can look at this from her perspective. And it's really wild that you say that today because I got a review today that I generally don't look at, but my publicist sent me. And it was just gave me so much hope because the book reviewer was enthusiastic and open to the book, even though she herself is anti choice. And she said to that discussion piece, that's exactly what we need more of. She said, I found the writing engaging and I myself am anti-choice, but I realize this is a part of life. And her whole thing is really clever. She reads and reviews the first chapter of books and whether she'll read more. And she said, I will definitely finish this book.
Mm.
And if more people were willing to have that discussion, even with themselves,
Mhm.
I think we would be in such a different, happier, better, richer place.
I know that for me, anytime that I have judged something, the universe has allowed me to experience it from the avenue that I opposed. Right.
Mm,
And although that has made for some really challenging lessons in my life, I now value so much what that gave me because it opened me to discussion. And now I find I really enjoy hearing another perspective and then even trying to catch. And I say enjoy not necessarily joyfully, but I like will breathe in the experience of why is this challenging me? And what can I learn differently? And those moments when it does really change, I find really, really important.
Sakuma.
Sorry about that. She's
that's life. That's the messy bits, right? That's
my messy cat. She ate grass, so
Opinions
her home.
needs to be heard right now. So we hear you, Kuma. Thank you.
Yeah.
love it.
One thing I was reflecting on is, so when you wrote the book, when Frida was really like, hey, I'm here, you got to move forward with this, you know previous to you ever connecting with me, any of those things, Roe versus Wade being overturned was like not even on the radar. And I mean, we don't live in the States, so maybe it was, and I just wasn't aware, but like from what I heard, it was not even on the radar. And so looking back, right, hindsight is 2020. I'm curious how it's been for you as you've kind of intuitively opened up more and connected more, because it was always there, right? You're just reopening that door, remembering, however you want to phrase it.
Mhm.
Um, Knowing what you know now with the time that we're in, and your book is being released in a week, less than a week, and look at the world that we're living in, a world that like I don't think any of us really truly thought we would get to. There was whisperings and people don't disagree and whatever, but like a world that we didn't believe would happen and that we would be in, and here we are. So I'm curious, like, I don't know if the question is making sense, but like as you've opened up and now looking back, you can see the timeliness of this. How was that experience for you? And like, have you had any insights around that?
I think it's been, I mean, the two words that come to mind are validating and humbling at the same time. Now we've got a dog. Oh my gosh, I love it. This is so my life. It's either like a child or a pet that
Doors
comes,
opening, my dogs are making noise.
or a spirit blowing my
Roll with
door.
it. It's fine.
Um, but yeah, I think it's been really validating because I did feel very alone in this endeavor for a long time. When when you get just rejection after rejection after rejection, people asking you to change the story, um, you can't help the human part of you can't help but think, am I off track? Am I off base here? Am I wrong? Am I reading the signs wrong? And it's validating that, because it's scary to listen to your body and spirit, whatever is working through you to push this forward. um, and sometimes I really didn't feel like I had ownership of the story. I really felt like it was sort of coming out of me and needed to come out. Um, but if I had fought my intuition, this book, the book world is so slow. It'd be another 2 years before it came out. And so the timing, I think people need a book like this now, or a lot of people. I could have used a book like this if I were younger. And yeah, if I were younger, the age of my reader demographic at this time, I would need this book now, not in 2 years. And it's also kind of humbling in the best, most lovely way and connecting way, in that oh yeah, this is not just me. I am not out here, hanging in the wind by myself. Like this is a lot. I think these are past versions of myself, my soul. I think there's just a lot of collective feminine pushing me forward, and I think the timing is validating. It's really beautiful. It's like the past and the future feminine all making sure that women have something to grab onto now.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking too, it's your experience with it, but also the experience in the book. I know the protagonist, has the abortion, and it's not this story of like, oh, but I was so sad about it, or like, oh, it was such a hard decision to make, which is often the languaging to justify the decision that a woman, or someone with a uterus might make. And that's not always represented. So, or often we'll hear about it like, well, what if the mother is sick, or the pregnancy isn't viable, or da 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 da. But it's like there's also this whole other collective of people who made the choice, and it was the right choice. And whatever their emotional process was through it, it doesn't matter, because it was a choice that felt right to them. And I see that really mirrored in your experience of like pushing a book forward that everyone was like, yeah, but can you just take that out? Or like, can you make her sad about the abortion? Or can it be that she has a miscarriage instead? Like, whatever it is, it's not allowing women to make a choice that's right for themselves and like embody it and own it, even if people don't understand. And I would even say it's broader than women. That's the case for a lot of us, a lot of folks, regardless of gender or sex or whatever. But for the purposes of this conversation, it's like we are the only ones that know what is truly right for us. And it's this interesting kind of mirroring of feel like being able to be fully embodied and feel good about your choice, even if it's something that somebody else wouldn't choose, or even if it's something that somebody else doesn't understand or doesn't like, or even if there are hard emotions, or you should feel hard emotions, but you don't. You feel like, no, this was the right choice and I'm glad I did it.
Mhm.
That's all okay. And that conversation in and of itself isn't had very often. So I this book, I see it as in the story, but also your kind of progression along with getting it out into the world is such an interesting timeline when you look at all of the other things happening.
It's been a trip. The whole thing. It's really been a trip.
I'm over the interesting. Easier for second book.
No, it is. It is. It has been. It has been. I think it's going to take me some time to process the whole journey, which I'm still kind of in. Um, but yeah, I was shocked to find that I mean, think of the millions and millions and millions of women's fiction books that have been written. This is the only one where the protagonist has an abortion. And I wanted to represent the emotions I felt when I had an abortion that I knew was right. It was the only decision for me. I grieved it. It was hard. An abortion is not a pleasant procedure, All of it is unpleasant. And I had a lot of sadness and loss around it, but it was still right. And I wanted to capture that. But most most people who have abortions don't the in art and TV and movies, it's usually a side character, and if they go through with the abortion, their life's a mess. And if they're the main character, they usually choose to keep the baby, and then it's like this wonderful thing. And so I just felt that this huge swath of the population that represents most people who have abortion, their reality wasn't getting represented. And I was really surprised that that was controversial to represent that.
Mhm. And yet intuitively you knew I can't change this. And now looking back, it's like, thank God you didn't, because what a different book you'd be putting out in a time. And again, it's not even the whole book, right? It's one piece of it, but it's the
Yes.
opening piece. And to be putting it out in the time now, if that was absent, I think would have really done the whole book and what it's doing a disservice. So it's like, again, that intuition of like, sometimes the intuitive hit is not the easy thing. It's not the like everybody's going to agree with it or get it or it's going to feel good, or but it's the thing that you just know in your body and your heart and your spirit, whatever, that it's like, this is what I have to do. And that's not easy. I think it's glorified sometimes, like follow your intuition and bliss, and sometimes that leads you pushing up a boulder up a hill for a
Yeah.
while.
Oh no, there was a lot of time when I, like years, where I was just like, oh, I think I'm supposed to keep writing this thing. But like I kept saying to my husband, I'm like, why can't my passion be like dentistry or accounting? You know, where I can go to work and know exactly what I'm gonna do for 8 hours and come home and like that's enough. I'm like, why can't that be my thing? So I really fought it for a long time. No, following intuition is not this like stroll in a meadow, for me anyway. It's
And
hard.
even the thing with writing too is it's always on the back of your mind, right? Like it's always kind of playing there. So you can be busy trying to get dinner ready or running around here and pieces come to you, right? Like it's constantly there until it's like being printed. And
Yeah.
so it is an all encompassing experience for sure. Especially
And
something so challenging as that.
right. And I would imagine you both can really I imagine you have similar experiences where you may be doing, just your earthly things and are like, well shit, I'm supposed to tell this client this and are like, this is coming through and I need a scrap of paper, I need my phone or yeah, these things don't follow our timeline or what's convenient for us a lot of the times.
Yeah. Well, and here's a question for the two of you being authors, because Ginette is an author as well. One day I will be.
Yeah.
When you are writing, because for me, when I'm just like journaling, da da da, whatever, it's a very intuitive process for me. It can be, right? Like I can obviously let my brain kick in and take control and like, become very analytical and literal. But I utilize journaling and writing and things like that to tap into my intuition, to process my emotions, all of those things. Do you feel like writing as a process, whether it be in your journal or as an author, is innately an intuitive process? Because as I'm hearing you talk, Jeanette, and Emily, you brought it up too, like the things just come in. Well, where do they come in from if not from spirit?
I'm
Yeah.
so curious. I can't wait. I need to hear what Jeanette has to say first. I'm so
Oh
curious. But
gosh.
like as someone with really developed intuitive skills, like how it is for you.
It's so intuitive. It has to be in flow state. I have a second book on my computer halfway through because I got everything out and now I'm waiting for what's the next part. And it's been 6 months and there's no next part yet. I can't force it. So for me, my writing was all in moments of being inspired, whether I was woken at 4 in the morning or I needed to get this section done. Like it wasn't methodical for me. It
Mhm.
was very like deeply intuitively inspired. It just had to like flow into it and I can't force it. Like it's not my book per se or the other one, even though it was my story, wasn't my book. It had to come out in flow.
Right.
Yeah. So how about for you?
Ugh. I think it's the same. I mean, it's like you say, it's like, well, I've been waiting for 6 months. I know. And what I do think is interesting is when I started writing my 31st year, which is my book that's coming out next week, I had a 6 month old and no childcare and no idea what I was doing. And so I had like, I had 4 hours a week. I had a grad student come for 4 hours a week. And during that time, I was I was definitely in flow. I mean, she would come, I would grab my laptop, I would hand the baby to her, grab my laptop, run out to a cafe or something, and be able to write. And I think that that is another sign that I was supposed to be it was kind of a gift from the universe. It's like, okay, she doesn't have a lot of flexibility, so we're gonna make this work for her when she needs it to work. And then I was scheduled to finish my second book last summer. I had blocked off some time from work, and I had a loss in my family that just upended the entire summer, and I have not written one word since. And I think it's kind of interesting how, I could afford to, obviously the circumstances were awful, but I could afford to, that my second book is something I can write whenever it comes. It's not tied to a time period. And I feel like the universe helped me be in that flow state when I needed to, so that I can get this book out when it was supposed to come out.
Absolutely. I totally agree on those really like divine universal timings of things. I find personally I've learned when we're forcing, trying to make something happen is when we just have to let go of the reins, be like, all right, it's not it. And then it'll just pull you back in when the alignments are there. And I think your book and the timeliness is exactly a beautiful example of that. Now, I have a question about your second book too, because I was going to ask this earlier. If there was going to be a second book, and so you're already saying there is it a continuation of the same characters from your first book, or is it completely separate book?
It's completely separate. I had that book land in my head also. And just like your book, I'm thinking, okay, I wonder when she's going to feel the pull to start writing again. And then I'm sure there's going to be some evident reason, that you had that gap. Um, so I have a second book that's totally separate in the plot and the characters, and a third book that's also totally separate in the plot and the characters. Although definitely noticing a theme, they're all based on like the feminine power. So whether it's friendship or agency, like feminine friendships, agency over your own body, connecting with my grandmother and feeling just rock solid in that relationship that is only by spirit. We never, we didn't occupy in these lifetimes the planet at the same time. So yeah, no, they're separate. Although someone did ask me if I'd be open to writing a sequel to this book, and if people were interested in that, I think that would be so fun. So maybe that will reveal itself at some point.
That's exciting. Can you hold up a copy? You have a copy there so we can see it?
Yeah, it'll be backwards so everyone can practice their backward
Oh no,
reading.
No,
it's
it's forward.
correct.
Yeah.
It's forward. Okay. So
Oh,
my 31st year and other calamities.
that's
Right.
awesome.
That's me. Yeah.
That's so great. And where are people able to find it?
They are able to find it most anywhere books are sold. So any bookstore in the US or Canada can order it for you if you go to an independent bookstore. And all the big box places, Amazon, Target, yeah, available there. And I'm excited because I got to hear a little piece. The audiobook is all finished and tied in a bow, so you can download an audiobook if you're an audiobook person from wherever you get your audiobooks, ebook, whatever your flavor, wherever you usually go, you can find it.
Beautiful. That's so exciting. We're so excited for you.
Thank you. And I just have to, I don't think I could have put this book out there truly without, and have my sanity somewhat intact without Elyse and her helping me to access all of the things that I've needed to access. So endlessly grateful for you.
Right back at you. Right back at you.
That's so lovely and so true, Elyse. I just got to say, you help keep a lot of people sane, me included. So you're just kind of that sort of person, that steady soul for a lot of people.
Yes, yes, totally.
Amazing. All right. Well, any other closing thoughts or statements, Elyse or Emily? Any last things you want to leave people with?
The one thing that's bounced around in my brain that I'm like, do I want to say that? But I'm just gonna, is, I really feel, and maybe it's a bold assertion, but I really feel, and I'm starting to feel more and more like those that create regardless of what you're creating, are tuning into their own spiritual abilities. So if you create in some way, you're tuning into that. Even when we look at like brainwave states, right? When you talk about dropping into a flow state, usually our brainwave when we're in that is similar to one where we are in meditation, where we are in the other parts of our brain that are not so like analytical and literal. And that is when we connect in with spirit, right? As practicing mediums or intuitives, it's like that's what, by tapping into that part of yourself, that's when you connect to it. So I just I really, you so often hear about artists and people, my girl Taylor Swift, she talks about waking up in the middle of the night hearing a sound. It's like, where does that come from in your brain, right? It has to be coming, in my opinion, from something higher than us to put things out to the masses. So all to say, if that is you and you're feeling that call to write the book or paint the picture or make the music or create the sound or build the thing or whatever it is, like in whatever way you can, leaning into that, because something is calling you forward to be creative, whether that's for you, whether that's for a larger group of people, whatever it is. I think that it's such a powerful story that you're sharing, because I think that it happens to a lot more people than we realize, and we brush it off as like, oh, that'll just be fluffy fun and whatever, and it can just be fun, but it also might be really healing for you or for other people, or reconnect you with aspects of your intuition that maybe we've shut down or blocked out or whatever. So I just feel like that creativity piece is just like one of the biggest crux points of how we can reconnect with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you said that. That's something I love, the opportunity to connect with people. They'll share with you if you're doing something. A woman the other night said, I'm thinking of writing a book. And then she just had like terror in her eyes. And she's like, how do I do that? And I said, you just start. And if you feel like you should, and if you said it out loud, and she was, I've been in her place. So I didn't say, do it. I just said, then please give it some thought. So I'm so glad you said that, because I think, just like our pets who are going to walk in when we're on a Zoom, or like they make no like logical sense, but we need them. And art, is not food, water, sunlight, but I think humans need art, and we all make art in different ways. And I think pets are all of that stuff that we need, that we can't really say why, is how we connect to spirit. Yeah. So I'm so glad you said that, and I hope people think on it. If they have some project or something that's like way back in here, they might give it a little airtime.
That's beautiful.
Anything last from you?
No, I mean, you guys just nailed it. Like it was a beautiful way to wrap it up. And I really hope that it helps inspire everybody to follow through on that thing in the back of their mind. Because that's really what we're here for, is to honor those things. We came in with a purpose. Those are those things, right? And so it's to give them that pathway forward. I think it's really what we're meant to do. And when we're doing that, we're in flow and we feel better about life, right? So might as well make it purposeful. So, anyways, with that, thank you again, Emily, so much for joining us again on the show.
Thank you both so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
It's been lovely, and I will put in the notes for everybody where they can connect with you, also to find your book and get your book. Highly recommend it. And we will be back again next week with some other awesome topic on Spirit Coffee Talk. So, thank you everyone so much for joining, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you.